Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Insure the Heroes in Military Life Planning. My name is Melissa Skur, and joining me today is Daniel Kopp. That is how you pronounce your last name, right?
It is, yes. We're the good.
Okay. I figured that much, but we are getting together today because it is Life Insurance Awareness Month. So Daniel and I have stayed in touch for the past year and talked a lot about different life insurance topics, and we thought it would be important to have the conversation that we're going to have today. So we hope that you join us and go ahead and share this with your friends. If you know anybody else in the military family sector that you think we would get value from this. So I want to go ahead and introduce Daniel today. Daniel, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about what you do over at Military Life Planning.
Well, thanks for having me on, Melissa. This is a topic that I'm personally very passionate about, which we'll get into a little bit later through some of my personal experiences as well as my professional ones. So right now I'm studying for the Certified Financial Planner exam to become a CFP, and looking to launch my own financial planning firm later on this year. I'm excited. I've been a volunteer financial counselor for many, many years through the Airmen and Family Readiness Center. So I was an officer on active duty for almost 9 years before getting out earlier this year. And so this is something that's long been a passion of mine, is helping people figure out their goals and their values and then orienting their financial lives around to take it. And life insurance is one of the key considerations as a part of that. So I created my military life planning a little while ago to just continue to offer value and write content and share things that are important in this area and topic.
Yeah, that's great. I know. I like what you say on your blog. You've been interested in personal finance really ever since you were little. So people do read blogs, huh? So that's really nice. I'm glad that you were able to merge your passion there with your Air Force career. So you've recently transitioned, and I know that's so you're in your RV, right?
Yes, I am broadcasting live from my RV in Central Georgia. So I've been traveling around the country on a sabbatical since April this year, 21 states, over 21,000 miles.
Wow.
And got a chance to see how beautiful and wonderful our country really is.
I know, that's great. I've really been following your pictures. So I know that's going to be a fun journey. And I'm waiting for you to come to Key West, but not during hurricane season. So.
Yeah, you guys have Tropical Storm Gordon just came through Florida. The other thing, it's so hot there right now. I prefer it in December, not August and September temperatures.
Find a spot. Well, the bases here, it's cheap, for the bases, but I don't know, they're already like packed. There's like 400 RVs during the.
It's really hard to get reservations. Yeah,
it's not impossible, but yeah, it's pretty hot. We've been hibernating. Looking forward to the fall coming up. Yeah, so I don't know. You guys are going to see here on the screen as we're running through some of these topics. We're going to be mindful of your time, but we're not going to rush through them because it's, life insurance and estate planning is very important. So it's just something that, it's good to kind of set aside some time for. So that's Daniel. And so you do want to go ahead and check him out on Facebook. I put the link at the end of this video. You should be able to see it. But in case you want to check it out now, it's Military Life Planning. And you can find him on Facebook. So we want to talk about the importance of knowing your significant other's wishes upon end-of-life care. I know that can sound like a very morbid topic, but Daniel has some particular thoughts on why it's important to have that conversation way before you even need to. So, there can be a lot of emotions involved. If your significant other is going to have an illness or sudden death, obviously. So, knowing these things ahead of time is going to make everything so much easier for you as a survivor. Having some confidence in what your significant other's wishes were. So I can only imagine how difficult that would be if you really didn't have conversations. Be faced with some decisions that you don't, of a wide variety of decisions depending on the situation. So Daniel, if you want to share your thoughts on that, what people can do and really what you would suggest.
Yeah, so this is born out of personal experience. For those that have not known or heard my story before, I am a widower now. So my wife, Sarah, passed away last August. We'd been married for almost 5 years. She'd had a significant illness and spent about the last 6 months of her life living in hospitals until she finally passed away. And so as a part of that journey, there were some scary moments along the way, including towards the end where at one point she was in the intensive care unit, the ICU, and almost to the point where they were going to have to intubate her, put a tube down her throat so the machine could breathe for her, in which case she would not have been able to communicate verbally anymore, even though she was still unconscious. Fortunately, that didn't happen, but it kind of brought home in that reality in that moment, making me very grateful for some of the conversations that she and I had shared over the years, the what ifs of life, including what would be if either of us had been in a position where we wouldn't have been able to communicate our wishes. Some people think about this being codified in a living will, and that obviously is something that's critical and important, but sometimes even just it can't account for all the nuances that may come up. And so being able to have an open, honest, transparent discussion with your spouse or significant other can help when these dark, hard situations do come up, to be able to be prepared for them. And this is kind of a hard topic: life insurance, estate planning, talking about the what ifs at the end of life care. Certainly for most people in our target demographic, military, Sarah was only 32. We don't think that we're going to die. But the best time to talk about this was yesterday. The second best time, though, is today. And the other thing, when you're talking about the what ifs of life, is just to have an opportunity to really break it up into smaller conversations. Try to do it all at once.
So overwhelming. And to also, make it something that is beautiful versus morbid. And then you really have that, not to get too crazy here, but you have a deeper level of intimacy with your significant other, really knowing, what their wishes are. And, I feel like that can bring a lot of peace, to you in grieving, in that whole grieving process, and just making it a fun conversation, as fun as it can be, because knowing these things and knowing what that person might feel is important to them. Maybe there's a certain charity. I know that my husband and I, we don't have all the details ironed out. He still needs to update his will, but he's had a lot of TDY training, and so it just hasn't happened. But we've had conversations, and it usually ends up being when we're driving. So I don't know if that's the greatest thing, but we have all our important life conversations. Taking really long trips. But I at least have like a sense of, but we haven't went through the nitty-gritty of it. And so I don't know how he would feel about certain end of life care procedures when you're talking about from the medical perspective. And I can only imagine being faced with that, some decisions,
and that's a key part, because it's not just about the what ifs at the end of life, but it's what ifs in between a critical health event and then not being able to speak for themselves. So talking about, well, how would you feel if you were put on a ventilator and it was breathing for you and keeping you alive, or a machine, pumping blood for you? How long would you want to stay with that? What kind of levels of quality of life would you want to have long term? And being honest and transparent about those kind of what ifs. And you're never going to know everything. This is not a 100% solution. This is just getting the general intent, and recognizing, because that is what will make it easier in the again, the what if that were to happen. You have had that conversation before. You're not having to guess. And then it also eases the burden of that spouse who's having to make decisions for the other one, because they're not just making it up. They've had this discussion. They've heard from their own spouse's mouth what they would prefer, what they would want.
Absolutely. I feel like that takes a huge level of anxiety off of a very dire situation. You have enough anxiety already. You have enough emotions. You have enough of regular life in the middle of it all. And so knowing, having that the confidence in making the decisions is huge. And then, even making sure, like, the practical aspects. I know we're going to talk about some practical aspects after the fact. God forbid you happen to lose a significant other. But, you bring up an interesting point, because it's really busy in the military as military families, and I know civilian families have busy lives too. So all this stuff really doesn't apply to anybody. But with military families, we have that extra layer of chaos.
Yes.
That's like, it just makes things so hectic. And when things settle down, you tend to just kind of move on and forget about all these crazy things you have to do. And so updating your medical directive and your wills and all that, between each other is like really important. And we do have that as a benefit for military families. So military families do get legal benefits, so they can always reach out to their local base and figure out what those are. But I know for us, for Coast Guard, they're not always around. So we have smaller installations. And so the reason I got mine updated is because we had like the district come through, but Joe happened to be TDY. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you have any particular thoughts, and it's okay if you don't, on what type of legal to use for that? I know you're not a lawyer, neither am I. We are not estate planning professionals. But I have kind of heard that the military legal is not quite as in-depth as some other estate planning services. So, I mean, I would encourage people to maybe see the differences. I mean, if money is an issue, obviously the military is usually free with all of that. But I do, if you have a really complex situation, or special considerations, maybe with businesses and things like that, a certain family dynamic, you may want to consider working with outside the military estate planning professional to do that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, that was a huge benefit for military members, that they get access to the legal offices at their various bases and get to have that kind of free setup instead of having to go pay an attorney or use other legal services that are out there. Yeah, and as you said, caveated all this, we're not attorneys and we're not providing legal advice, so you just need to do your own research. But along with that is, a couple considerations that I've seen over the years that kind of deal with it. For the average, service member who comes in single, maybe not even married at this point in time, no kids, certainly a basic will is going to be able to be done, and it's going to cover most of their situations. After you get married, there's some additional considerations and dealing with that. Kids are kind of where the bigger factor comes in, as you mentioned, and especially for children that have special needs. Oftentimes that's where that family may need to go and do some specialized estate planning with an attorney to create, perhaps a special needs trust or similar types of conservatorship, guardianship for children. And then, as you said, businesses, most of the time, the standard basic legal services are not going to be covering businesses. And a lot of people think, well, I'm not a business owner, but they forget that as a military member, they may own several rental houses and things associated with that, they may not have incorporated or actually even have an LLC, which, we're learning about that. But one of the things that people don't keep into consideration that they maybe probably should. But for the most part, as far as a basic start, it's better than nothing. That's for sure what they can provide.
Yeah, and I know we're kind of going a little off topic, but just in lieu of, I'll leave this with, in lieu of the explosion of military entrepreneurship. When I say military entrepreneurship, us included, it's not just military members. I'm not a military member, I'm a military spouse, but military veterans, military spouses, and military members are just rocking it right now. You know what I mean? Like, and they have been for quite a while, and it's just becoming more and more other thing for military families to have some really amazing businesses. And then, sometimes it's sole proprietorship where you're just earning money in your own name. And then sometimes you're taking that extra step and going to the entity level. And so that does, it needs to be a consideration how that all connects to your estate plan.
Exactly.
So.
The last thing I'll say here at the significant other wishes is just talking also about the kind of service and burial versus cremation, family and considerations involved in all that. Just one of the other what ifs to have along the way that can help ease that otherwise very, very difficult time by having concrete knowledge about this is what your spouse or significant other wanted to do, so you're not having to guess.
Absolutely. Bringing up the point of, I don't know if we talked about this already, if we did before our broadcast, but remind me, life insurance is that vehicle, that tool to really provide the gift and the monetary, need that you, or the monetary tools basically for you to execute some of these things. And, being able to have family members flights and stuff cost, are paid for, that's huge. And we didn't talk about that yet on here, did we?
No, that was one of the things that I definitely wanted to bring up as a consideration. A lot of people don't think about. So when people are doing life insurance needs evaluation, often evaluating how much income replacement, or trying to take care of final estate bills, pay for the funeral, etc. But for military members, it's a really big consideration. They're often scattered across the country or across the world, far away from family. Most people are not in the position to suddenly drop several $1,000s on a flight to go a long way away and be able to be at their daughter or their sister's, family members, someone's funeral associated with that. So it's one of the things that a lot of people don't think about when they're considering, but that's one of the ways that life insurance can act as a final gift to help ease some of that burden, to be able to make sure, pay for the service, cover the funeral costs, debts associated, but also bring in family and loved ones so that they can attend the service without having the financial strain or going into credit card debt or otherwise being able to not be able to come.
It can be very important to those family members or friends even sometimes, to be involved. I mean, military families, I was talking to Kate last night, like, we're so messed up. We have friends all over the world that become our family members, and we have, emotions tied to all these different places that we're living in.
Yes.
And so it's very difficult to determine anymore where home is. And so I've seen just a variety of military life situations. You could have a family that's stationed in a particular area for a lot longer than normal, longer than 4 years, and that area has become their home. And so where are they getting married? It's easy to say, well, it's always going to be back home. It's just really easy to assume that. You don't know unless you talk to your significant other. You don't know how that's going to change, especially if families are going to put roots down in a particular area, and then it just happens to be their wish to stay in the area. If they lose each other or something, lose one another. So I don't know. It's hard to have these conversations.
And that's where a valued expert can come in and provide a perspective. So almost all the bases have accredited financial counselors that are able to provide advice free of charge to people who come in, who can help people work through this stuff as a neutral third party or as an expert. There's also great services out there like what you're doing, Melissa, to help people get a free quote for a life insurance needs evaluation. Because one of the things to think about too is, people in the military think, well, I've got SGLI, I'm good to go. Or for the service member or for their spouse, they've got family SGLI.
Yeah.
And they never stop to evaluate, well, actually, how much does that $400,000 cover for the service member or the $100,000 for the family member? Is that actually going to be enough? What are the actual income needs? For most families, that's going to be insufficient to be able to provide income of replacement, provide child care in case the spouse, say, was the primary child care services. And then also with that, there's just a lot that goes into it emotionally that impacts people's finances too. I certainly experienced that, where I'm normally a very, very, very good budgeter, but in the months after Sarah died, it was hard for me to think about being that, and I probably spent a lot more than I should have in some ways when it came to just everyday life.
Exactly, and then outside your normal. And I think there's my pastor at one point had told me that people should never make any decisions within 3 months after a tragedy period. So, and he knows that from a counseling perspective, and so that's really important. Are there measures in place to make sure that's going to happen? You know what I mean? And that whole planning process really goes into it. And then, like with your life insurance out there, when you get outside life insurance, you have options usually on how benefits can be paid out. Do you want a lump sum? Do you want them to be over a certain period of time? Sometimes that can be decided pre-purchase, and lots of times the claims departments will help you, and what's nice is being military families, we have beneficiary counseling out there, and that is also something that can be found with a lot of other services. So it is important.
One thing I'll say in here too, Melissa, is, when people do get that life insurance money, this is an opportunity oftentimes for unsavory, unscrupulous people to come out and try to prey on people who are not having their best interest. So anybody who would ever be in that situation, not only, like you said, should they not be making key financial decisions, but they should be very, very careful about, oh, this is my friend's cousin's second, nephew who comes in and wants to help.
Right.
Okay, well, are they, a couple of questions. One, are they fiduciary? That's a fancy word that they absolutely always work in the best interest of the client that they're working for. If they're not and won't sign a fiduciary oath on paper, you need to run away, stay far away from that. There's a lot of great fee-only certified financial planners, CFPs out there who can provide that kind of service. And this is my goal, I think, launched here later on, to be able to provide that kind of service, to go beyond just the finances aspect, but provide elements of, all right, let's deal with the emotional aspects that go along with grief, because I've lived it. I know what that is like.
Right, and that's going to be a valuable service and perspective that you're going to be able to offer your future clients and people today here on this interview. And you do think that that's really important, because you may have a survivor that's a spouse that isn't used to dealing with the money. Maybe the service member did good and the spouse was the one, or vice versa. And it's always great for both to have. I feel like couples should always roll up their sleeves and figure out a way to talk about money more, but it's hard, especially with deployments, TDYs. Like, I know that when Joe was going deployment, we were newly married, and it's like trying to do your budget conversation over Skype. It's like not working.
It's hard.
So you just, figure it out, but it's, and our budgets always change. So, it's very possible to have a survivor would just really not be equipped to handle money. And that's a very important point.
And sadly, too, oftentimes family and friends will mean well and try to help, but either withdraw or sometimes even give bad advice in there. So, where that extra benefit of having a qualified expert who come in and help out. And again, that doesn't mean that you kind of isolate yourself off from people who don't have anybody, but just being very, very careful.
But it's your new life.
Yes.
And it's extremely important, because family relationships, while most of the time are good and strong, are not always, and distance plays a role in that a lot of the times. And so, and I feel like, losing your significant other, or anybody close to you for that matter, makes you soul search, and really start to figure out what you're going to do. What are you going to do for you? If you have children, what does life look like now for you and your children? And so, having confidence and finding the fiduciary resources out there would be huge in helping you, find peace with any decision going forward.
Yeah, and grief is a journey. It's not a easy thing. It's hard work, and a part of that is coming to terms with the aspect that some people have of survivor's guilt, right? So they don't want the money. They're like, I don't want anything to do with it. I want my spouse back or my significant other back. So there's a lot that goes into it, and that's why what we talked about at the beginning of understanding your significant other spouse had their wishes, having these discussions to talk about these estate planning considerations, over the course of a relationship, the course of a marriage. Those also help with that issue of survivor's guilt as well. That understand that this was a gift from your departed spouse or significant other to help ease whatever comes next.
It's not tainted,
It's a love gift. It's a gift from love.
It is. And, you see that marketed a lot. And I really do like how your website was talking about how you wish estate planning and life insurance can be perceived more as a gift. And it really is almost the most appropriate Valentine's gift you could give. Life insurance companies do try to reiterate that during the holiday seasons. Give the gift of love, ensure your love, legacy of love. And that's what you're talking about. It's not about the money. It's not about the transaction. It's not about, the slimy insurance person hounding you like crazy. I mean, we as insurance salespeople, we take value in annoying the crap out of people until they make
Well,
that
that's a huge benefit. And one of the things looking back that, Sarah and I talked about is we wish that we had gotten her additional coverage sooner, because we waited till we were about ready to start having children rather than early on in the marriage. And over the course of the initial period of marriage, she had developed a few health issues that then made it that much more difficult, made additional cost. Whereas if we had waited or not waited and gotten it done sooner. So just like the conversation issue, the best time to talk about this was yesterday, second best time is today. When it comes to getting life insurance coverage, the best time was yesterday, second best time is today, because you don't know. Each of us may develop health issues that may come up, spouses, service members alike, that may make it more cost prohibitive. So especially the younger you are, the better off the deal that you can get to get that necessary term coverage in place.
Absolutely. And then, it's really a no-brainer. I mean, I could argue that as early as 18 to 25, you should just get some coverage in place. And then all of a sudden, if you're in college, you're not going to pay for it. A lot of times, people's parents, they understand the value. So you can, a parent can own a policy on a young adult. And I think that's a fabulous idea that does become a little challenging. You may not have the right income, or you may not have a spouse yet. So insurance companies do have limitations how much coverage they're going to give somebody that isn't married or doesn't have children. But I mean, 25 and up is things that you better start looking into, because the risk you have for developing issues or whatever. I mean, even if you're single, you likely will be married at some point. You likely will have children over the next 20 years. So locking that in as early as possible is always a great idea to do that. And then upon your life events, reviewing it when you get married. Lots of times people get married, it's like some people are really savvy and they like to do it right away. It's kind of like we're merging our car insurance, and they'll go talk to their insurance people, and the others are just like, forget about it. Like I'm on cloud nine. Don't even talk to me about that. So it's difficult. I often wonder, as a life insurance professional, what happens. Maybe they don't have kids yet, but how do you know when exactly that's occurring? So, you know what I mean? You might not have the life insurance, and then God forbid that's happening in the process, and then you lose somebody. So it's definitely an important issue. So we do want to reiterate collectively, from different perspectives, our life and our financial background, that life insurance really is a gift. And with that, it's something that is not as expensive as you think. So you might have some people sitting back going, well, okay, great, fine. I need to get this. But I really don't have any money in my budget right now. Have you seen, just from kind of working with people, or just, having conversations, that people often overestimate that cost? Or do you have any tips for how people can budget?
Well, I mean, a lot of people just deal with budgeting and cash flow challenges, right? But it comes down to priorities. And that's what I help people step back when I'm working with them first and see is, all right, you're spending your money on what's important to you. And if you're not, well, then let's reevaluate so you can be spending your money on what's important to you. And for most people, getting the additional coverage beyond SGLI is to the tune of, 2, maybe 3 lunches out a month, and everybody can brown bag an extra 3 meals a month to make this happen.
Lattes, less leggings, reduce coffee. I mean, we all of us can agree in the military. We kind of know the trend of what we're spending money on. So it's kind of a hard argument to say it's not there. I mean, unless you really are, you're just buckling it down and being, frugal. And maybe you've got 5 kids, and there are situations I can see where it would be very difficult. But even those are the situations where people really need to consider that. I remember one of my colleagues that I worked with at State Farm, she just always would say every single month, we would write that life insurance check, and our agent came over and we were pushing our baby in the cradle, and there were so many times we didn't want to write that life insurance check, but we would never cancel it, and so it is important to kind of have to make room for the budget, because you can't just go get it and not keep it. So You did want to talk about, I think we jumped around a little bit, but I'm going to go back. You wanted to talk a little bit about how life insurance can ease the loss of income, and just makes, it helps you as a survivor concentrate on your grieving and find your new path without that financial stress. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so for most people, this would be the primary consideration when it comes to evaluating how much life insurance they actually need for the service member, and then for the spouse or significant other as well, oftentimes the non-service member. And it really can come down to it just basically a simple time value calculation that, again, if you're not sure how to do that, you can Google around, take a look at that. There's some great life insurance calculators out there to take in there, or talk to your AFC at local base or somebody like Melissa here. So when you take a look at that, being able to provide that income gap, especially for those with young kids at home, say you had an E6 or something like that who had a working spouse, the spouse non-service member passes away. Now suddenly that service member is looking at a situation where their monthly budget went from, say, $4,000 a month to losing $2,000 a month of loss of income. So life insurance can help ease that transition, but also for those with kids too, plan ahead for future big expenses like college, continuing education through secondary, high school, and things like that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to have short-term and long-term expenses. And, when you think about having a union such as a marriage, it's a partnership. You're both really, I hate to use it in that kind of term, but it is in a way, because you're both contributing to your household, whether you're making a paycheck or not. If you're a stay-at-home parent, whether you're a guy or a girl, you are contributing financially to your household. And I think a lot of people struggle with putting that dollar value on it. But childcare in general is expensive and difficult, and even in the civilian sector, and it's not always available or cost effective in the military. And so you have a lot of military childcare issues, and you just got to think about what this is going back to why it's good to have the conversation, and how it is really individual to everybody's situation. What is the service member going to do? God forbid they lose their stay-at-home or working significant
Exactly. That's a key consideration. It's not just about replacing the loss of income from a working spouse, but from a stay-at-home spouse too. How much would it cost to hire a full-time nanny or whatever the case may be to provide coverage for that same exact skill set? I mean, you see those articles come out occasionally from local national publications about how much would you have to pay your stay-at-home spouse for all the work that they do, ridiculous.
They go viral, and it's a base of 40,000 all the way up to like 100,000. I mean, you could debate, is a stay-at-home parent really financially worth 100,000? Yeah, it depends. But this is where it really becomes, what is your individual family lifestyle look like? What are you paying for now that you would prefer that keeps happening, or what is that stay-at-home parent doing that you would like to continue to have happen? You want your children to have still a little bit of a normal lifestyle, if there is a normal after losing a parent, continuing to do certain activities that cost money and time and chauffeur. And how is the service member going to be able to maintain their career in the military, which is always hectic with schedules? How does that happen? Maybe it happens perfectly well without any financial assistance because there's extended family involved. That's very common, but it's not always. So, you know what I mean? I personally have a really messed up family situation. So, we have kids, like there's nobody that really good at this level trust. So, I'm not the only military spouse that kind of has that situation. And so it really just depends on maybe you have couples that don't have parents anymore. Maybe they died. There's a lot of things to consider, and it really is dependent on your personal preferences and your personal situation. And that's why it's so important to try to have these conversations. So I want to ask you, if you don't mind, how were you and Sarah able to fit those conversations in?
Well, it really goes back to when we first started getting to know one another, when we were dating, long before we ever were
Okay.
engaged. I mean, it was just a conversation as a part of what are your financial priorities? What are the things that we're going to expect to do? When I'm working, are you going to be working? What kind of salary are you going to expect to make? Just being open, honest, and transparent with one another from the beginning. And that's carried over. Then early on in our marriage, we faced an opportunity where she had to go in for a very minor medical procedure, but involved a little bit of anesthesia. And that was kind of a key, like, oh, we should probably talk about a few things. Like,
Right.
again, infinitesimal small percentage chance that
Right.
something bad would go wrong. But that was one of the key considerations for us to kind of talk about, like, okay, well, what are some what ifs associated with this? What if you couldn't speak? What would your wishes be? We also saw a situation where, with my grandparents, they went through a situation where my grandfather was unable to speak for himself, and he and my grandmother had never had that conversation. So,
Right.
what does that look like? So, oftentimes, just looking at other people's circumstances when they go through this can be a good way to spur up. Hey, did you hear about what happened to Jim and Deb? Like, maybe we should talk about that. Using that as a pretext. There's always sometimes an issue in the news or something happening
Yeah.
around a public figure that
All the
start that
time.
conversation too.
And it's so important. So, I really appreciate you being on here today and being willing to share your expertise and your story. I know that it can be a difficult situation to do, and then you've been so nice and kind to share that in an effort to bring awareness to the situation. Um, are there any other topics that you want to discuss? I know we didn't really have a 100% plan, and so I don't want to cut it off. I'm still on board for having the conversation. If Facebook people want to hear us, we're here. Were there any other thoughts that you wanted to discuss?
I just want to, again, just emphasize people that taking a small step is better than taking no step. When it comes to this, start with a small conversation and go from there. It doesn't have to be all at once. So that's the main point I want to have people walk away from is start small, but stay steady at it.
Absolutely, and that it's really tough because being in the life insurance industry for 15 years, or insurance in general for 15 years, and I would say life insurance probably about almost 5 now. I've had conversations with a lot of consumers, and I've heard the wackiest excuses for why
I'm
they
sure.
don't want to buy life insurance. I'm not buying life insurance because I'm not buying that amount because somebody will kill me, and I don't want my spouse getting rich. Are you crazy?
Oh,
So
wow.
I've heard it all, and there are people who, I mean, it was just like prospecting and stuff. You have some people that you encounter they weren't necessarily looking, and you just end up talking. Like, they're shut down. Like, they don't want to talk about it. And a lot of times I have people shopping around for their significant other. I mean, they cannot apply, but they're just getting quotes and whatnot and getting information, and they're trying so hard to get their significant other to understand the importance of getting this life insurance coverage, and they're facing huge barriers to getting it done, and that's hard. That's really hard because then you're leaving your significant other in a really tough situation. God forbid you do pass away, so we encourage people to make it a date night conversation, little by little. Like Daniel said, you do not have to go all in. That can be very overwhelming for people, and military families, we have a lot of counseling services available. So if it's
take advantage of those.
Absolutely. How do you talk about important issues, whether it's estate planning or your situation, your communication, your overall financial situation, whatever it is. We're so lucky to get all these free benefits, but a lot of times we don't want to talk to them. I don't know why. Sometimes it's closely attached to the military, but there's plenty of resources out there. So, Daniel, you are now remarried. You might have.
Oh, not yet. Engaged.
Oh, engaged. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. We'll close it up. Well, congratulations. That is so exciting. So I just wanted to celebrate with you there. What is in store for you coming up? Anything on
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you in person, Melissa, again later on this month.
There. Oh my God.
For the Military Influencer Conference. So I'm excited about that.
So I'm gonna have to catch you next year. So we have our anniversary coming up. So I don't know if you know that I'm not going to the conference this year. Sorry.
Oh,
I know.
Oh, well.
Sorry, I think there's a little delay there. Yeah, I know. I'm bummed. I really had a good time last year. I was looking forward to catching up. But I'm looking forward to year 3. So I really hope it keeps going. For those of you that don't know, the Military Influencer Conference is coming up, and I don't think it's completely too late to get involved. But it's really great if you're in the military sector.
I saw.
I don't know if you can find a room or whatever, but I'm sure people will share.
Hook up with somebody. Save cost on the room.
Yeah, definitely. So that's in Orlando, Florida. So yeah, you guys should definitely check out Daniel over at Military Life Planning. You can find him on Facebook. You probably will see the link there to go ahead and like him and follow, his financial topics that he has going on. And we're welcoming any questions. So you're probably catching this after the fact. We understand it was a little long and lengthy, but we hope that these were good, insightful tips to help you discuss this important matter with your significant other. So just do let us know if you have any questions in the comments, and we'll try to get to them.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Daniel. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Melissa. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this, something that is so important, and hopefully my experience can be used to let others learn from it.
I know it is. It's definitely helpful because personal stories is really where a lot comes from. That's something that people really don't even think about until they hear, other people's stories. So we appreciate you taking the time to share that.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you later.